Picture this. It's negative 55 degrees Celsius. Your breath freezes instantly into crystals that tinkle as they fall to the ground. The darkness is absolute. The sun hasn't risen in weeks. And in the middle of this frozen apocalypse, hundreds of people are gathering for what might be the most extraordinary feast you've never heard of. 9,000 kilograms of fish, frozen solid, ready to feed an entire village that's been cut off from the world for months. This is Yakutia, the coldest inhabited region on Earth. And this is not just dinner. This is survival. This is tradition. This is a story that will change everything you think you know about food, community, and what it means to be human in the most extreme conditions imaginable. My name is On the Ground in one of the most remote villages in Sakha Republic, also known as Yakutia, in the heart of Siberia. Behind me, you can barely see through the frost fog, but there are trucks, massive Soviet-era vehicles carrying tons upon tons of Omul fish. These aren't ordinary fish. Omul is the legendary white fish of Lake Baikal, considered one of Russia's greatest delicacies, and today we're about to witness something that happens only once a year in this frozen corner of the world. But here's what you need to understand. When temperatures drop to minus 55, life doesn't stop here. It transforms. The rules change. Food becomes something different, something sacred. And what you're about to see will blow your mind. Let me take you back 6 months. Summer in Yakutia, if you can call it that, lasts about 8 weeks. During this brief window, when temperatures climbed to a comfortable 15 degrees Celsius, the entire region mobilizes. Fishing crews from Lake Baikal, over 1,000 kilometers away, begin their annual harvest. They're not just catching fish for restaurants or markets, they're catching fish for survival. The Omul, scientifically known as Corygonus migratorius, is a species that exists nowhere else on Earth except Lake Baikal. It's part of the salmon family, with silvery scales that shimmer like liquid metal and flesh so delicate it melts in your mouth. For centuries, this fish has been the lifeline of Siberian communities. Smoked, salted, frozen, or eaten raw, Omul is more than food here. It's currency, it's culture, it's connection to a land that tries to kill you every single day. But getting 9,000 kilograms of Omul from Lake Baikal to this remote Yakutian village? That's where the real story begins. The journey starts on the ice-cold shores of the world's deepest lake. Fishing crews, many of them from indigenous Buryat communities who have harvested Omul for generations, use traditional methods combined with modern efficiency. They set nets in the pelagic zones of Lake Baikal, where Omul feed on zooplankton at depths of up to 400 meters. Each fish weighs between 1 to 2 kilograms. To collect 9,000 kilograms means catching roughly 6,000 individual fish. Once caught, the Omul is immediately processed. Some are smoked over alder and aspen wood shavings, a technique that gives the fish its distinctive aroma that travelers on the Trans-Siberian Railway dream about months after tasting. Others are salted, using ancient preservation methods. But the majority are frozen solid, not in industrial freezers, but naturally, because in Yakutia, nature is the freezer. The fish are loaded onto trucks. These aren't modern refrigerated vehicles. These are battle-hardened Russian trucks with engines that can function at temperatures that would kill any Western vehicle. The drivers are legends in their own right. Men and women who navigate the zimniks, the ice roads that only exist during winter, crossing frozen rivers and tundra, where one wrong turn means disappearing forever into the white void. The journey takes 3 weeks. 3 weeks of driving through some of the most hostile terrain on the planet. 3 weeks where if your truck breaks down, you have maybe 6 hours before the cold makes survival impossible. 3 weeks where the temperature outside drops so low that metal becomes brittle and shatters like glass. And yet they come every year, because in this village of 300 souls, this delivery of Omul means the difference between a winter of abundance and a winter of desperation. Now, you might be wondering, why Omul? Why not other fish? Why not beef or chicken or any of 1,000 other protein sources? The answer lies in something most people in the modern world have forgotten: ecological harmony. Omul isn't just nutritious, though it is, packed with omega-3 fatty acids and protein that sustains people through the brutal winter. Omul represents a fishing culture that has existed sustainably for thousands of years. When you eat Omul in Yakutia, you're eating history. You're eating a connection to Lake Baikal, the Galapagos of Russia, a UNESCO World Heritage Site that holds 20% of the world's fresh water. But here's what's going to shock you: the way they eat it here. Forget everything you know about cooking fish. Forget grilling, baking, frying, or steaming. In Yakutia, when it's minus 55 outside, they practice something called stroganina. Let me spell that out. Stroganina. It's a Siberian delicacy that sounds absolutely insane until you try it, and then it becomes an obsession. Stroganina is frozen raw fish, shaved into paper-thin slices with a knife, served with nothing but salt, pepper, and raw onions. The fish is so frozen that you can hear it crack when the knife cuts through. The slices are so thin they're almost transparent. And when you put them in your mouth, they don't taste frozen. They taste fresh, alive, like the lake itself has been preserved in crystalline time. But the preparation is an art form. You can't just hack at a frozen fish. The blade must be sharp enough to shave at an angle that creates delicate ribbons. The fish must be frozen to exactly the right temperature. Too cold, and it shatters. Too warm, and it becomes mushy. The person wielding the knife needs hands that have done this thousands of times, hands that know the fish by feel, even through thick gloves in sub-zero temperatures. And in this village, everyone knows how to make stroganina, from the babushkas who have weathered 80 Yakutian winters to the children who learn the knife technique before they can read. It's not just a cooking method, it's an identity.
The trucks arrive at dawn, or what would be dawn if the sun actually rose. Instead, there's a brief lightening of the darkness, a gray twilight that's the closest thing to daylight this village will see for another month. The temperature is hovering at minus 53 degrees Celsius. Your eyelashes freeze together if you blink too slowly. Exposed skin gets frostbite in under 2 minutes. But the entire village is outside, waiting. The lead truck's engine rattles to a stop. The driver, a man named Mikhail, who's been making this run for 27 years, climbs down from the cab. Ice has formed on his beard, giving him the appearance of a frost giant from ancient mythology. He doesn't smile. It's too cold for that. But there's something in his eyes. Pride. Relief. Mission accomplished. The back of the truck opens, and there it is. 9,000 kilograms of Omul, frozen into solid blocks, stacked like silver bricks of precious metal. Because that's exactly what they are here. Precious. Irreplaceable. The village elder, a woman named Sardana, who is 76 years old and has survived more winters than most people will ever experience, steps forward. She's wearing traditional Sakha clothing, layers of fur and leather that have kept her people alive in this impossible place for millennia. She doesn't speak. She doesn't need to. She touches the first block of frozen Omul, and in that gesture, there's everything: gratitude, reverence, hope. This is the moment. This is what 9 months of planning, 3 weeks of brutal travel, and countless hours of labor have led to. The feast is about to begin. But then, something happens. Something nobody expected. From the darkness beyond the village lights, there's movement. At first, people think it's the wind playing tricks, the Arctic wind that howls like a living thing and creates hallucinations in the endless night. But no, this is real. This is substantial. A second convoy. 3 more trucks emerging from the frozen wilderness, unscheduled, unannounced, and by the look of them, barely functional. One is trailing smoke. Another has a shattered windshield patched with wooden boards. Mikhail's face goes pale beneath the frost. Sardana's eyes narrow. The crowd goes silent. Because in Yakutia, when unexpected vehicles arrive in the dead of winter, it means one of 2 things. Either someone is in desperate trouble, or someone has brought desperate news. The lead truck of this second convoy lurches to a stop. The door opens, and what happens next will determine not just the fate of this feast, but the survival of 2 villages instead of 1. The driver who emerges from the damaged truck isn't what anyone expected. She's young, maybe 30, with frost coating her eyelashes and a look of absolute exhaustion carved into her face. Her name is Nadezhda, and behind her vehicle are 47 people. 47 souls from a village called Topoline, 60 kilometers northeast, a place so small it doesn't appear on most maps. Sardana moves forward, her boots crunching on the snow that sounds like breaking glass at this temperature. No words are exchanged at first. In Yakutia, you learn to read survival in someone's eyes before they speak. And what Sardana sees makes her heart sink. Topolone's supply convoy never arrived. The truck that was supposed to bring their winter provisions broke through the ice on the Indigenous River 3 weeks ago. The driver survived, but everything else, food, fuel, medicine, now rests at the bottom of one of Siberia's most unforgiving waterways. The village has been surviving on reserves, but those reserves are nearly gone. In another week, maybe 2, people will start dying. The elderly first, then the children. That's how winter kills in Yakutia. Quietly, efficiently, without mercy. Nadezhda's voice is hoarse when she finally speaks, and you can hear the weight of responsibility crushing her. She's the village teacher, but more importantly, she's the person who was elected to make the desperate journey to find help. They've been traveling for 4 days. 4 days in trucks that should have died a dozen times over. 4 days with minimal food, sleeping in vehicles where if the engine stops, everyone freezes to death within hours. We heard about the Omul delivery, Nadezhda says, her Russian accent thick with the distinctive Sakha intonation. We're not asking for charity. We have furs to trade. We have carved mammoth ivory. We have whatever you need. But our children. Her voice breaks. She doesn't need to finish the sentence. The villagers of Sardana's community exchange glances. 9,000 kilograms of Omul, calculated to feed 300 people through a winter. Now there are 347 mouths. The mathematics are brutal. Share the food, and everyone gets less. Maybe not enough. Don't share it, and 47 people face starvation. This is the moment where civilization is truly tested. Not in comfortable cities with grocery stores and delivery services, but here, in the absolute razor edge of human survival, where one decision determines who lives and who dies.
Sardana doesn't hesitate. She raises her hand and the entire village falls silent.
When she speaks, her voice carries the authority of 76 winters survived, 76 springs witnessed, and a wisdom that comes from understanding something most modern humans have forgotten. We are all just temporary visitors in a world that doesn't care about our individual struggles. In Yakutia, she says, we have a saying, Omuk yeke, kanige yeke. The fish is large, but the community is larger. Our ancestors survived because they understood that individual survival is a myth. Either we all survive, or eventually none of us do. Bring your people. Bring them all. The Omul will feed everyone. There's a murmur through the crowd. Not disagreement. That would be unthinkable in Sakha culture. But concern. Legitimate worry about what this means for their own families. And Sardana addresses it head-on, because that's what real leadership demands. We will ration carefully. We will fish more aggressively through the ice. We will hunt. We will make our bulus, our ice sellers, work harder. And we will send word to the regional center that Topoline needs supplies. She pauses, her breath creating crystalline clouds. But tonight we feast, all of us, together, because that is who we are. The decision is made. This is the Sakha way. The indigenous people of Yakutia didn't survive the harshest climate on Earth by competing with each other. They survived through radical cooperation, through understanding that in extreme environments, selfishness is the fastest path to extinction. Within minutes, the community mobilizes with the efficiency of a military operation. The men begin unloading the frozen Omul blocks, their hands protected by thick reindeer hide gloves that have been passed down through generations. The women fire up the outdoor stoves, massive iron constructions that can function even in temperatures that would freeze diesel fuel. Children are dispatched to the bulus, the permafrost ice cellars dug deep into the ground, where traditional foods like horse meat, berries, and fish are stored year-round at a constant -10 degrees Celsius. These ice cellars are marvels of indigenous engineering. Dug 8 to 10 meters into the permafrost, they maintain perfect temperature stability without electricity, without machinery, without any modern technology. Food stored in a bulus can remain preserved for years, sometimes decades. Archaeologists have found mammoth meat in abandoned bulus that was still technically edible after 5,000 years. The permafrost doesn't just freeze, it suspends time itself. Now comes the part that will absolutely blow your mind. The preparation of 9,000 kilograms of frozen omul for a community feast is not just cooking, it's performance art, it's cultural transmission, it's a ritual that connects the present to thousands of years of ancestral knowledge. The elder women take their positions at long wooden tables that have been set up outside. Yes, outside, at -55 degrees, because inside, the ice would melt too quickly, and that would ruin everything. They're dressed in layers that make them look twice their actual size. Thermal underwear, wool sweaters, traditional Sakha leather and fur coats called Sakha tan, reindeer skin boots that extend past the knee, and mittens made from wolf fur, the only animal fur that doesn't accumulate ice from frozen breath. Each woman holds a knife. These aren't ordinary kitchen knives. These are specifically designed stroganina knives, with blades that have been sharpened to almost molecular thinness. In skilled hands, these knives can shave frozen fish into slices so thin you can see through them, each slice curling like a wood shaving from a carpenter's plane. The frozen Omul blocks are brought forward. Mikhail, the truck driver, personally selects the best specimens. He knows fish the way a jeweler knows diamonds, able to assess quality by sight, by weight, by the subtle color variations in the frozen flesh. Each omul is placed on the cutting table, still frozen solid enough that if you dropped one, it would shatter like ice sculpture. And then the cutting begins. A woman named Kuyara, who is 63 years old and has been making stroganina since she was 7, demonstrates for the newcomers from Topoline. Her movements are precise, economical, almost meditative. The knife angle is critical, 15 degrees from horizontal. Too steep, and the fish shatters. Too shallow, and you get thick chunks instead of delicate shavings.
The pressure must be consistent, the stroke must be smooth, and most importantly, you must work quickly, because even at minus 55 degrees, the heat from your hands can begin to thaw the fish surface, making it unsuitable for proper stroganina. The first slice peels away, translucent and beautiful, catching what little light exists in the Arctic darkness. It curls naturally, creating a ribbon of frozen fish that looks more like art than food. Kiara places it on a large platter, then another slice, and another. Her rhythm is hypnotic. In 30 seconds, she's produced enough stroganina to serve 5 people. Multiply that by dozens of women working simultaneously. Multiply it by hours of continuous preparation. The mathematics are staggering. To prepare enough stroganina for 347 people, assuming each person consumes roughly 400 grams, requires processing over 140 kilograms of omul just for this first feast. But stroganina is only the beginning. Other crews are smoking omul in traditional smokehouses, where alder and birchwood create an aromatic environment that infuses the fish with flavors that commercial smoking can never replicate. The smoke must be cold. Hot smoking would cook the fish, which defeats the purpose. The process takes hours, with families taking shifts to maintain the precise temperature and smoke density. Still others are preparing omul soup, called uka in Russian, but known as salamat when made the Sakha way. This isn't your delicate French bouillabaisse. This is survival food that tastes like heaven. Whole omul, potatoes, stored in the bulu since autumn, wild onions, and salt. That's it. No herbs, no fancy ingredients, just pure, intense flavor that comes from fish so fresh it was swimming in Lake Baikal less than a month ago and has been perfectly preserved by Siberia's natural deep freeze. As preparation continues, something remarkable happens. The children from both villages start playing together. Despite the catastrophic circumstances that brought Topolinia's residents here, despite the food insecurity and the desperate journey, the kids are laughing. They're playing traditional Sakha games like reindeer and wolves, where some children pretend to be reindeer herders while others are the wolves trying to scatter the herd. They're building miniature balagan houses from snow blocks, recreating the traditional Yakutian dwellings their ancestors lived in before Russian influence introduced log cabin construction. This might seem insignificant, but it's not. In indigenous cultures that have survived extreme environments for millennia, the resilience of children isn't just important, it's the entire point. These kids are learning the most crucial lesson of Arctic survival. Community is stronger than catastrophe. Joy is an act of rebellion against a landscape trying to kill you. Play is preparation for the serious business of staying alive. Meanwhile, the adults from both villages are sharing stories around the outdoor fires. And this is where you start to understand something profound about Yakutian culture. They're not talking about the near disaster that almost wiped out Topolinie. They're not dwelling on the hardship. Instead, they're sharing humor. Dark, absurd, deeply Siberian humor about the ridiculous circumstances of their existence. One man from Topolinie tells a story about the time his truck broke down at minus 68 degrees and he had to walk 7 kilometers to the nearest village. By the time he arrived, his beard had frozen so solid that when he entered the harm house, it shattered into pieces. "I had to grow a whole new beard," he says, and everyone roars with laughter that sends frozen breath clouds billowing into the darkness. A woman from Sardana's village counters with a tale about the winter when it got so cold that the fog froze mid-air, creating ice crystals that hung suspended like a glittering curtain. "We had to walk through it slowly," she explains, "because if you moved too fast, the crystals would cut your face. It was like walking through a cloud made of knives. But it was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." These aren't exaggerations. They're not tall tales. This is just life in Yakutia. Reality here is stranger and more extreme than fiction could ever be.
Finally, after hours of preparation, Sardana raises her hand again. The feast is ready. 347 people gather in the largest building in the village, a community center that was originally a Soviet-era school, now repurposed for exactly moments like this. The room is heated by 3 massive wood stoves, bringing the interior temperature to a almost comfortable minus 10 degrees. Compared to outside, it feels tropical.
The tables are laden with food, mountains of stroganina, glistening and perfect, smoked omul that fills the air with an aroma so intoxicating it's almost overwhelming, steaming pots of salamat soup, frozen berries collected last summer, slabs of horse meat, another Sakha staple. And for the children, a special treat, ice cream. But not the kind you're thinking. This is kurchak, made from frozen whipped reindeer cream and crushed berries, a dessert that has existed in Yakutia for thousands of years and tastes like nothing else on earth. But before anyone eats, Sardana stands, and what she says next will stop your heart. This omul came from Lake Baikal. But we are not from Lake Baikal. We are from here, from this impossible place. And tomorrow, I am going with Mikhail and his convoy back toward the regional center. I am 76 years old. I have lived a full life. If the journey is too much for me, that is acceptable. But I will not allow another winter to trap any of our communities without hope of resupply. We need better communication. We need emergency protocols. We need the government to remember we exist, and I will not rest until that happens. The room goes absolutely silent, because everyone understands what she's actually saying. The journey to the regional center, over 300 kilometers on ice roads in the dead of winter, is dangerous for anyone. For a 76-year-old woman, it could very well be fatal. But this is Yakutian leadership. Not asking others to take risks you won't take yourself. Not sacrificing the young when the old have already lived their fullest lives. This is how communities survive impossible conditions, through courage that borders on madness. Nadezhda, the young teacher from Topolino, stands immediately. Then I'm going too. Our village needs representation. And if you're brave enough to risk this, how can I be less brave? And just like that, the mission is set. But first, they feast. The first bite of stroganina is a revelation. For those who've never experienced it, imagine the purest, freshest fish you've ever tasted, and then multiply that by 10. The omul is frozen, yes, but as it touches your tongue, it doesn't feel cold. It feels clean, crystalline. The texture is delicate, almost creamy, despite being solid ice seconds before. The flavor is subtle but complex. A hint of sweetness from the fish's natural oils, a mineral quality from Lake Baikal's ancient waters, and something else entirely, something that tastes like wilderness itself. The people eat in silence at first, not an awkward silence, but a reverent one. In Yakutia, where food can mean the difference between life and death, eating is never casual. Every mouthful is acknowledged. Every meal is a victory against a landscape that wants you gone. The stroganina is served on large wooden platters with only 3 accompaniments: coarse salt, black pepper, and raw onions sliced so thin they're almost transparent. That's it. No sauces, no elaborate preparations, because when food is this perfect, this fresh, this hard-won, you don't hide it behind complexity. You honor it with simplicity. Mikhail, the truck driver who brought the omul across 1,000 kilometers of frozen hell, sits next to a young boy from Topolino named Ison. This is his first time tasting omul. His eyes go wide with the first bite. Mikhail smiles, a rare expression in a place where smiling too much can mark you as soft, as unprepared for the reality of Yakutian survival. My grandfather, Mikhail says, his voice low and gravelly from years of breathing frozen air, used to say that omul are the souls of Lake Baikal's ancestors. Every fish carries a memory of the lake before humans ever walked its shores. When you eat stroganina, you're not just eating fish. You're consuming history. You're connecting to something older than civilization. It sounds poetic, maybe even mystical, but in indigenous cultures that have survived for millennia in places that should be uninhabitable, there's no separation between the practical and the spiritual. Food is survival. But survival without meaning is just prolonging death. The omul matters not just because it provides protein and omega-3 fatty acids, but because it represents connection to the land, to the community, to the ancestors who figured out how to live here long before modern technology existed. The smoked omul comes out next,
and the entire room fills with an aroma that is impossible to describe unless you've experienced it. It's smoky, obviously, but not like Western barbecue. This is cold smoking over alder and birch, a process that takes 8 to 10 hours and requires constant attention. The result is fish that has been transformed into something entirely different. The flesh is amber gold, the texture is firm but tender, and the taste is so intensely flavored that a small piece satisfies in ways a large steak never could. An elderly woman from Topolino named Aquilina takes a bite of the smoked omul, and tears begin streaming down her weathered face, not from sadness, but from relief, from the overwhelming emotion of knowing that her village, her family, her grandchildren will survive this winter. The smoked fish represents more than food. It represents hope. It represents the fact that human kindness still exists, even in the most extreme corners of the world.
As the feast continues, something remarkable happens. The elders from both villages begin teaching the younger generation, not with formal lessons or lectures, but through story, through demonstration, through the oral tradition that has kept Sakha culture alive for thousands of years, despite waves of colonization, Russification, and Soviet attempts to erase indigenous identity. Kuyara, the woman who demonstrated stroganina preparation earlier, calls the teenagers forward. She holds up her knife, the blade so thin it's almost invisible from certain angles, and begins explaining the technique not just as cooking instruction, but as philosophy. This knife, she says in Sakha, her words translated by a bilingual teenager for those who don't speak the indigenous language, is passed through generations. My great-grandmother used this knife, my grandmother, my mother, and when I am gone, my daughter will use it. The steel remembers every fish it has cut, every winter it has survived. You cannot buy this kind of knife in a store. You inherit it, and with it, you inherit responsibility. She demonstrates the cutting angle again, showing how the blade must move in one smooth motion, how the pressure must be distributed evenly, how you read the fish's frozen texture to know exactly where to cut. If you rush, the fish shatters. If you hesitate, the fish thaws. This teaches you about life in Yakutia. You must be decisive, but not hasty, strong, but not brutal, confident, but always respectful of the power of this land. The teenagers watch intently. In the modern world, this kind of knowledge is disappearing. Young people in Yakutia often move to cities, drawn by easier lives, by jobs that don't require surviving -70-degree winters. But moments like this, watching a master craftsperson demonstrate skills that took a lifetime to perfect, create connections that smartphones and internet can never replicate. Meanwhile, the men are discussing the upcoming journey to the regional center. Mikhail spreads a hand-drawn map on one of the tables, and a crowd gathers around. The map is crude by modern standards, no GPS coordinates, no satellite imagery, but it contains knowledge that Google Maps could never provide. It shows where the ice is thickest on various rivers, where nalads, areas of open water that never freeze, even in the deepest winter, are likely to appear, where abandoned Soviet-era structures can provide emergency shelter if a vehicle breaks down, where wolf packs have been spotted, because yes, wolves are a legitimate danger on ice roads in the dead of winter. Mikhail explains that the Kolyma Highway is theoretically passable right now, but 3 weeks ago, we heard about a convoy that hit a nalad near Kubyume. 2 trucks went through the ice. The drivers survived, but barely. We need to take the longer route, north to Batagai, then west toward Yakutsk. It adds 2 days to the journey, but the ice roads there have been trafficked more heavily, which means more stability. An older man named Prokopi, who has been driving ice roads for 40 years, nods gravely. The danger isn't just the ice, it's the blizzards. You get caught in a Siberian blizzard on an ice road, and you can't see 5 meters in front of your truck. You can't stop.
The vehicle will freeze solid in under an hour. But you can't drive fast either, or you'll miss a turn and end up in the tundra. So you maintain exactly 40 kilometers per hour. You pray to whatever gods you believe in, and you trust your instincts. Sardana listens to all of this with the calm expression of someone who has already accepted whatever fate awaits her. "When do we leave?" she asks simply. "Tomorrow at first light." Well, first light is a relative term here. We leave at 9 a.m. when there's enough ambient brightness to see the road. The convoy will be 5 trucks, mine in the lead, 3 supply trucks behind me, and 1 emergency rescue vehicle at the rear. Sardana, Nadezhda, you'll ride with me in the lead truck. If anything goes wrong, you'll have the best chance of survival there. The words hang in the air. If anything goes wrong. Not if something goes wrong, but if anything. Because on Yakutian ice roads in the dead of winter, it's not a question of whether something dangerous will happen. It's a question of whether you can survive it when it does. After the feast, as people's bellies are full and the immediate desperation has been replaced with satisfied exhaustion, the real work begins. Preparing Sardana and Nadezhda for their journey is a community undertaking that involves every person present. The women gather clothing, not modern expedition gear that would freeze and shatter in Yakutian cold, but traditional Sakha clothing that has kept people alive in this impossible climate for millennia. First, a layer of special thermal underwear made from reindeer calf skin, the softest and warmest material that exists. Then wool sweaters, 3 of them. Then a traditional del, the Sakha coat made from reindeer hide with the fur facing inward, providing insulation that synthetic materials can never match. Over that, a heavier coat made from wolf fur, because wolf fur has unique properties. It doesn't accumulate frost from frozen breath the way other furs do. The boots are particularly important. These are turbasa, Sakha boots that extend to the thigh, made from reindeer leg skin with the fur intact. Inside the boots are multiple layers of dried grass that acts as natural insulation. Worn properly, turbasa can keep your feet warm even when standing on ice at -60 degrees for hours. Worn improperly, you lose your toes to frostbite within minutes. Akulina, the grandmother from Topolino, personally fits Nadezhda's boots, checking and rechecking the grass insulation, making tiny adjustments that seem insignificant, but could mean the difference between life and death. Your mother would be proud of you. She whispers to the young teacher, but she would also tell you the same thing I'm telling you now. If the journey becomes impossible, if the weather turns truly deadly, you turn back. There is no shame in survival. The only shame is dying for pride. Nadezhda nods, but her eyes are determined. She's made her decision. She's going. Meanwhile, the men are preparing the trucks. Each vehicle undergoes a complete inspection. Engine oil is checked, special oil that can flow at extreme temperatures. Diesel fuel is treated with anti-gel additives. Batteries are tested and double-tested. Tires are examined for any weakness that could cause a blowout on the ice. Emergency supplies are loaded. Extra fuel, food, medical kits, satellite communication equipment, flares, and axes, and most importantly, specialized cold weather sleeping bags that can keep someone alive for days at -70 degrees if they're stranded. Mikhail oversees everything with the precision of a military commander. He's done this run dozens of times, but he never takes it for granted. In Yakutia, he tells a young driver who's joining the convoy for the first time, complacency is death. The moment you think you've mastered the ice roads, the ice reminds you who's really in control. As midnight approaches, not that anyone can tell from the perpetual darkness, the community gathers for a final ritual. A shaman, ancient and weathered like driftwood, emerges from the crowd. Shamanism was brutally suppressed during the Soviet era. Practitioners were imprisoned or killed, and the tradition nearly died out. But it survived.
because in places like Yakutia, where the environment is so extreme that rational preparation sometimes isn't enough, people need connection to something deeper, something older, something that acknowledges the mystery and terror and beauty of existence in the coldest place on Earth. The shaman lights a fire using traditional methods, no matches, no lighters. Friction and breath and patience create a small flame that seems impossibly fragile in the Arctic cold. But it grows, and as it grows, the shaman begins to chant in Old Sakha, a language even most Sakha speakers don't fully understand anymore. The words are ancient, pre-Christian, pre-Russian. They invoke the Ai spirits, the sky deities who control the weather, the ice, the fate of travelers. He takes a cup of kimis, fermented mare's milk, the traditional Sakha beverage, and sprinkles it into the fire while calling out ihak, ihak. The word means abundance, but also blessing and protection. He repeats it 9 times. 9 is a sacred number in Sakha cosmology. Then he approaches Sardana and Nadezhda. He marks their foreheads with ash from the fire, a blessing, a protection, a recognition that they are undertaking something that transcends ordinary life. He says, "The spirits see you," he says in Russian, so everyone can understand. The ancestors honor your courage. Go with their blessing. Return with their guidance. And if you cannot return, know that your sacrifice will be remembered in story and song for generations.
As the ritual ends and people begin to disperse to sleep before the convoy's departure, a young boy comes running into the community center. He's breathless, terrified, and his words come out in a panicked jumble. "Radio! Message! The Indigirka River!" Mikhail grabs the boy's shoulders, steadying him. "Slow down. What about the Indigirka?" The boy takes a shuddering breath. "There's been a warming. 3 degrees in the last 2 days. The ice roads, they're saying multiple sections had become unstable. The route you planned, it might be impassable." The entire room goes silent. A warming. In Yakutia. In the dead of winter? 3 degrees might not sound like much, but when you're at -55, a shift to -52 can be catastrophic. It can turn solid ice roads into death traps. It can create knolls where none existed before. It can make a dangerous journey absolutely suicidal. Sardana and Mikhail exchange glances. Nadezhda's face goes pale. The elders murmur among themselves. And everyone is thinking the same thing. Do we postpone? Do we risk it? Do we even have a choice? But before anyone can speak, there's another sound. From outside. Distant, but growing closer. The unmistakable sound of aircraft engines. In Yakutia, in the dead of winter, at midnight, in a village with no airport, no landing strip, no reason for any aircraft to be anywhere near this location, hearing engines means only one thing. Something very, very unusual is about to happen. The sound grows louder, and now everyone can identify it. Not a fixed-wing aircraft, but helicopters, plural. The distinctive thump-thump-thump of rotor blades cutting through air so cold it's practically solid. Within minutes, 3 massive Mi-8 helicopters, the workhorses of Russian Arctic aviation, appear through the darkness, their searchlights creating columns of frozen air crystals that look like pillars connecting earth to sky. The helicopters circle once, twice, then begin their descent onto a flat area just outside the village that the community has kept clear for exactly this kind of emergency. The rotor wash creates a blizzard of snow that temporarily blinds everyone, forcing people to shield their faces and turn away. When the engines finally shut down and the rotors slow to a stop, a figure emerges from the lead helicopter. He's wearing a government-issued parka with EMCOM patches, the Russian Ministry of Emergency Situations. Behind him, crews begin unloading cargo: food supplies, medical equipment, satellite communication gear, and most importantly, ice-penetrating radar equipment used to assess road conditions in real time. The official's name is Dmitry Sokolov, and he's a coordinator for Arctic emergency response operations. He approaches Sardana and Mikhail with the brisk efficiency of someone who has done this kind of work 100 times before. But there's also something else in his expression: respect. Even government officials from Moscow learn quickly that in Yakutia, the local elders command authority that supersedes bureaucratic rank. "We received your distress signal about Topolino 3 days ago. It took us this long to organize the response because of the weather, but we're here now. We have enough supplies to sustain both villages for 3 months, and we're establishing a permanent emergency communication relay so this never happens again." Relief washes through the crowd like a physical wave. 3 months of supplies, communication equipment. The journey to the regional center, the dangerous, potentially fatal journey that Sardana and Nadezhda were preparing to make, is no longer necessary. But Sardana doesn't smile. She steps forward, her 76-year-old frame somehow commanding more presence than Sokolov's government authority. 3 days, she says quietly. You received the signal 3 days ago. In 3 days, 47 people could have starved. In 3 days, a village could have died. We are grateful for your help now, but we need you to understand something. We cannot depend on rescue operations that take 3 days to arrive. We need infrastructure. We need reliable ice roads. We need the government to remember that Russian citizens live here, not just in Moscow and St. Petersburg. Sokolov's professional mask slips for a moment, and genuine shame crosses his face. "You're right," he says simply, "and I am bringing your message back to the capital. Things need to change." As emergency crews begin unloading supplies, Sokolov pulls Mikhail aside and shows him data on a ruggedized tablet. What Mikhail sees makes his blood run colder than the -55-degree air around him. "The warming you heard about on the radio isn't temporary. It's part of a larger pattern. Climate change is hitting the Arctic harder than anywhere else on Earth. Over the past 20 years, average winter temperatures in Yakutia have risen by almost 4 degrees. That might not sound like much, but when your entire infrastructure, your entire way of life depends on permafrost and ice roads, 4 degrees is catastrophic. It can turn solid ice roads into death traps. It can create knolls where none existed before. It can make a dangerous journey absolutely suicidal." Mikhail stares at the data, processing implications that go beyond one winter, one convoy, one village. What does this mean for us? For communities that depend on these roads for survival? Sokolov doesn't sugarcoat it. It means adaptation. Permanent roads are prohibitively expensive. We're talking billions of rubles for infrastructure across permafrost that's itself becoming unstable. More helicopter supply runs are possible, but they're expensive and weather-dependent. Some communities might need to relocate. Some might need to become more self-sufficient. The era of reliable ice roads connecting remote Yakutia villages, that era is ending. The weight of this revelation hangs between them. For indigenous communities that have survived in the Arctic for thousands of years, adaptation isn't new. They've weathered ice ages and warm periods, Russian colonization and Soviet industrialization, cultural suppression and language loss. But climate change represents something different, a transformation of the fundamental landscape itself, happening faster than human communities can adapt.
That night, after the supplies have been unloaded and distributed, after the people of Topolino have been given secure shelter and the promise of more permanent solutions, the two villages gather one final time. The Emer-Com helicopters will leave in the morning, taking Nadezhda back to Topolyano, along with enough supplies to sustain her village until better infrastructure can be established. But before anyone sleeps, there's something that needs to be said. Sardana stands before the assembled crowd. The traditional fire is burning. The shaman is present. The children are watching. This is a moment that will be remembered and retold for generations. When I was a child, Sardana begins, her voice carrying clearly in the frozen air, my grandmother told me about the Great Famine of 1932. The Soviet government had seized our grain, our horses, our cattle. They said it was for the collective good, for building the socialist paradise. But what they built was starvation. In our village, 117 people died that winter. My grandmother survived because her neighbor, a woman she barely knew, shared half a bucket of dried fish. Half a bucket. That's what stood between life and death. She pauses, letting the story sink in. My grandmother never forgot that kindness, and she taught me something essential. In places like Yakutia, where the environment itself is trying to kill you, humans have only two choices. We can compete with each other for limited resources, fighting over scraps until we all die. Or we can cooperate, share, support, and survive together. Our ancestors chose cooperation. That's why we're still here. That's why Sakha culture has endured. Her eyes sweep across the crowd, making contact with both villages. Today, you witnessed that choice again. We had 9,000 kilograms of Omul, calculated to feed our village through winter. When Topolyano arrived, we could have turned them away. We could have said, this is ours, we need it, your tragedy is not our responsibility. But we didn't, because that's not who we are. That's not who our ancestors were, and that's not who our grandchildren will be. Now her voice grows stronger, more urgent. The government official told us that the ice roads are failing, that climate change is transforming our world, that everything we've relied on for generations is becoming unstable. And he's right. The future will be harder than the past. Resources will be more scarce. Winters will be more unpredictable. The challenges we face will multiply. She raises her hand, the same gesture she used to silence the crowd earlier. But here is what I want you to remember. The Omul matters, yes. Food matters. Survival matters. But what matters most is the choice we make when resources are scarce. Do we hoard, or do we share? Do we isolate, or do we connect? Do we face the future with fear and selfishness, or do we face it with courage and community? The crowd is absolutely silent. Even the children have stopped fidgeting. This isn't just a speech. This is a teaching, a transmission of cultural wisdom from one generation to the next. The 9,000 kilograms of Omul will be consumed. In weeks or months, it will be gone. But the choice we made today to share, to welcome, to support, that choice will echo forward. The children who watched us tonight will remember. When they face their own impossible decisions, when they're confronted with scarcity and fear, they will remember that their ancestors chose generosity, and they will be braver for it. Is that what you also believe?